The trial of fired police officer Derek Chauvin is now hearing from medical experts, including a specialist on breathing, who turned this courtroom into a classroom.
To understand the knee on the neck, you need to examine your own necks, all of you here in the jury, like I'm doing now.
4 factors, he said, led to George Floyd's death from low oxygen.
That he's turned prone on the street, that he has the handcuffs in place combined with the street, and then that he has a knee on his neck, and then that he has a knee on his back and on his side. You're able to see how they're positioned at different points.
In distressing expert evidence, he used graphics to show the position of officers and how Mr. Floyd's breathing was fatally compromised.
It was almost to the effect as if a surgeon had gone in and removed the lung. Not quite, but along those lines. So there was virtually very little opportunity for him to be able to get any air to move into the left side of his chest.
Would this be in any way akin to breathing through a small opening like a straw?
Yes, it would. So, I mean, when you have to breathe through a narrow passageway, it's like breathing through a drinking straw. But it's much worse than that, because breathing through a drinking straw, I mean, is somewhat unpleasant, but not that unpleasant. And then it gets much worse than that.
Using photographs, Dr. Tobin saw great significance in the position of Mr. Floyd's handcuffed right hand.
Because he's totally dependent on getting air into the right side. So he's using his fingers and his knuckles against the street to try and crank up the right side of his chest. This is his only way to try and get air to get into the right lung.
Every time they take a fentanyl dose.
Chauvin's defense team is continuing to suggest that illicit drugs taken by Mr. Floyd were a factor in his death.
The end result of fentanyl can include respiratory depression.
Right, through the mu receptors.
Prosecutors responded that that is entirely theoretical.
Any evidence then that any fentanyl in his system depressed his breathing in any way whatsoever?
No, and that's further borne out in the carbon dioxide.
Thank you, Dr. Tobin. No further questions.
At the heart of this case is the precise cause of Mr. Floyd's death. Was it Derek Chauvin's knee on the neck or some other factor? Robert Moore, News at 10, in the United States.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
So that was roughly a 17-second clip?
Right.
And you counted 7 or 8 breaths?
Between 7 and 8, yeah.
And did you use this to calculate a rate of respiration?
Yes, because, I mean, it's simple. Once you have 19 seconds and you count out the number of breaths you have here, and if it, say, you count out 7 breaths, that will come out at a respiratory rate of 22.
Is that number, the respiratory rate of 22, significant to this case?
It's extremely significant.
Why is that?
Because one of the things in this case is the question of fentanyl. And if fentanyl is having an effect and is causing depression of the respiratory centers, the centers that control breathing, that's going to result in a decrease in the respiratory rate. And it's shown that with fentanyl, you expect a 40% reduction in the respiratory rate. So with fentanyl, his respiratory rate should be down at around 10. Instead of that, it's right in the middle of normal at 22.
So you didn't see a depressed rate of respiration or breathing rate in Mr. Floyd?
No, it's normal.
And so what does it tell you, bottom line, with respect to fentanyl as relates to Mr. Floyd?
Exactly. In terms of fentanyl, one of the major changes you see in fentanyl is a slowing of the respiratory rate. So, and again, we would be expecting a 40% reduction in the respiratory rate with fentanyl. The normal respiratory rate is 17 breaths per minute, plus or minus 5. So that would mean a normal respiratory rate of between 12 and 22. That's the normal range of respiratory rate. And so if it was with fentanyl, you'd be expecting a respiratory rate of 10. Instead of that, you counted here yourself. And you can see when you counted yourself that the respiratory rate is 22. So basically it tells you there isn't fentanyl on board. That is affecting his respiratory centers. It's not having an effect on his respiratory centers.
So Mr. Floyd's respiratory rate was normal at 22 just before he lost consciousness?
Correct.
So the jury may have heard some other information in the case about the fentanyl related to an elevated carbon dioxide level in Mr. Floyd's body in the emergency room. Was that significant to you?
Yes, that's very significant as well.
How so?
Because he's reported to have a PCO2, sorry, I take it back. He's reported to have a carbon dioxide level in the arterial blood in the emergency room of 89. That's a very high level of carbon dioxide. And so you have to take into account what are the factors that might have led to that. And there's particularly important factors in Mr. Floyd to explain why his carbon dioxide was found at 89 in the emergency room.
So, doctor, would you first tell us what would normal have been for carbon dioxide levels?
The normal carbon dioxide level in you or me is 35 to 45 millimeters of mercury. That's the norm. You don't need the millimeters of mercury stuff, but they're the units that are given in the hospital chart.
So you said that there were significant factors in the case of Mr. Floyd. Would you help the jury understand what those were?
Yes, the important factors are that we know that he made his own last spontaneous effort to breathe at 20:25:16. After that, you can look at the videos and you see he makes no effort to breathe. He makes no breath. The last breath he took was at 20:25:16. Then we know after that he stayed on the street for another 3 minutes or so. Then he's placed into the ambulance, and we know that in the ambulance they attempted to put in an airway, an eye gel, and you can see that on the Officer Lane's body cam. You can see all of that happening, and then you can see the time at which they actually successfully inserted the airway and when they gave him the first breath. And that is a gap of 9 minutes and 50 seconds from when he last took a breath.
And why is that significant?
That's very significant because we can calculate what is the rate of increase in the carbon dioxide in somebody who doesn't breathe. If somebody doesn't take a breath, carbon dioxide increases at a predictable rate. And that rate is up to 4.9 millimeters of mercury per minute that it increases. And so he has not taken a breath for 9 minutes and 50 seconds. So you would expect, just on that basis, that his carbon dioxide level will go up by 49. So you add 49 to the normal values of 35 to 45, and then you add that and you're going to get a value of between 89 and above, and so it comes out virtually identical to the value that they found in the emergency room of 89.
So doctor, what's the punchline with respect to that? What does it tell us?
The significance of all of that is it's a second reason why you know fentanyl is not causing the depression of his respiration. What you're seeing is that the increase in his carbon dioxide that is found in the emergency room is solely explained by what you expect to happen in somebody who doesn't have any ventilation given to him for 9 minutes and 50 seconds. It's completely explained by that.
So when a person then is not breathing, then carbon dioxide would naturally continue to build up in the body?
Yes.
And that's what matches what was seen in the OR for Mr. Floyd?
Precisely.
Now, you said that there were other things that were significant that were related to the rate of respiration, and we talked about fentanyl.
Right.
Was there anything else?
Yes. The other things, there's two other things that are very important to the respiratory rate, because you saw it with your own eyes, exactly his respiratory rate. And the first thing is that if you have somebody who has underlying heart disease, and the heart disease is so severe that it's been said that it's causing shortness of breath, that it's causing you difficulty with breathing. If somebody has heart disease that's causing shortness of breath, virtually all of those patients are going to have very high respiratory rates. They're going to have respiratory rates of 30, over 30, even over 40. When you have heart disease, that'll give you shortness of breath. Instead of that, we find that his respiratory rate is normal at 22. The second thing that's important about the respiratory rate of 22 is if you have somebody where the primary problem in the body is airway narrowing, where you have somebody where there is that the airways are being compressed, there's narrowing in the neck, or there's narrowing like in somebody in the chest, what the response, the physiological response to airway narrowing is a normal respiratory rate. And that is what he has. So it's but the respiratory rate that you see that's normal is the expected physiological response in somebody who has airway narrowing.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts.
Review the history of terminal events for May 25th, 2020.
Yes. What was kind of unique, what was absolutely unique in this case was the volume of materials I had to review. I've never had a case like this that had such thorough documentation of the terminal events.
And by way of the thorough documentation, what makes it so thorough, in your opinion?
Well, the use of videos is unique in this case. Certainly, as medical examiners, we use videos, but there's never been a case that I've been involved with that had videos over such a long time frame and from so many different perspectives.
Are you aware then of Dr. Baker's conclusions then on the manner of death?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'd like to show Exhibit 193 that's been stipulated to subject to Dr. Baker's foundation. So first, Dr. Thomas, what do we see here on Exhibit 193?
This is a copy of the certificate of death of Mr. Floyd.
Okay. And so, Brett, if we could kind of highlight just through the word underlying. Just to make it a little bigger to see. Okay. Based on your review of the evidence and the death certificate, do you agree with Dr. Baker's determination on the cause of death?
Yes, I do.
And is that by the word immediate on here?
Yes, cardiopulmonary arrest complicating law enforcement, subdual, restraint, and neck compression.
Have you, Dr. Thomas, formed an opinion about the mechanism of death?
Yes.
Would you tell us what that is?
In this case, I believe the primary mechanism of death is asphyxia or low oxygen.
So we'll come back to the mechanism in just a minute. Can you explain to the jury what this cause of death means and why you agree with it?
Well, it's kind of in two parts. So there's the cardiopulmonary arrest, which it doesn't provide a lot of additional clarifying information because, in a way, everyone dies of when your heart stops and your lungs stop. That's cardiopulmonary arrest. But as a forensic pathologist, I would use cardiopulmonary arrest when to differentiate it from a cardiac arrest. So this is not a sudden cardiac death, a sudden cardiac arrhythmia. This is a death where both the heart and lungs stopped working. And the point is that it's due to law enforcement subdual, restraint, and compression. That is kind of what ultimately is the immediate cause of death, is the subdual, restraint, and compression.
And just so it's clear for the jurors, does cardiopulmonary arrest mean heart attack?
No.
Does it mean fatal arrhythmia as a primary cause of death?
No.
It simply means that the heart stops and the lungs have stopped.
Correct.
It's another way of simply describing death itself.
Right.
Can you explain what's referred to, looking here at the terms, subdual, restraint, and neck compression?
Those were activities by the law enforcement agency officers involved. Subdual is subduing someone, trying to restrain them is, in Mr. Floyd's case, involved handcuffing him, his positioning on the ground, the prone position, the people kneeling on him. And the neck compression is the knee on the neck specifically. Additionally, there was some back and other things being compressed by the officers.
So if you put all this together, cardiopulmonary arrest, complicating law enforcement subdual, restraint, and neck compression, what does that mean?
Well, what it means to me is that the activities of the law enforcement officers resulted in Mr. Floyd's death, and that specifically those activities were the subdual, the restraint, and the neck compression.
And does this then also represent your own conclusion?
Yes.
A conclusion you have reached and an opinion you hold to a reasonable degree of medical certainty?
Yes.
Would you tell us what you reviewed in order to reach this conclusion?
All of those things that I mentioned earlier, again, what's sort of unique about this case is that often I would just review the medical examiner case file, and that would provide information about what the cause and manner of death is. But in this case, the autopsy itself didn't tell me the cause and manner of death, and it really required getting all of this other additional information, specifically the video evidence of the terminal events, to conclude the cause of death and manner of death.
So did it help you determine whether this was what I might refer to as a lights out kind of death, a sudden death?
Right. So what I observed from all of these videos is this was not a sudden death. Mr. Floyd did not, it's not like the snow shoveling where I told you somebody comes in, collapses, and clutches their chest and falls over. There was nothing sudden about his death. So that's what I would have expected if it was a cardiac arrhythmia or abnormal beating of the heart. Typically those are someone really falls over pretty quickly, and this was not that. Likewise, it was not the type of death that has been reported in fentanyl overdose, for example, where someone becomes very sleepy and then just sort of gradually, calmly, peacefully stops breathing. This was not that kind of a death. So I felt comfortable ruling out those as causes of death. And then on the flip side, I could clearly see from watching the video what happens to Mr. Floyd during this subdual, restraint, and compression, and what happens to his breathing is it gradually becomes more difficult and then stops.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.
To what we saw in court today, from what I understand, you were in the media overflow room, or in the family overflow room. I know Phalonis was the family representative inside the courtroom, but you were in the overflow room. How difficult was that? Had you seen that video before?
I've seen bits and pieces. I still to this day haven't watched it in full. I think as the opener argument started, I think they came out pretty strong, and we were warned before that it could get graphic, and I tried to mentally prepare, but I think after the video started, and I think as they showed Chauvin kneeling on his neck and like kind of repositioning, and just hearing my uncle ask for help and say he couldn't breathe, I actually got up and walked out. So
you walked out of the courtroom?
Yeah, I actually walked out of the family room. I couldn't watch it.
How difficult was it to see even the beginning of that video?
I think the beginning I saw. I told myself I was going to try to watch as much of it as I could to prepare myself, because they did let us know that it would get graphic and that everything that would be going on during the trial. So mentally, I wanted to prepare beforehand, and so I watched a nice chunk of it, but not in full.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here, and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives.
By George Floyd's brother, Terrence Floyd. And I think it goes without saying, but feel still necessary to say just how sorry we are for your loss, and really appreciate you joining us. You had the opportunity to go into court one day this week, and you've been watching this testimony and seeing these videos that are just gut-wrenching. How are you holding up personally? And if you will, tell us what it was like when you were in the courtroom.
Well, as far as how I'm holding up, it's the love and the support that we're feeling from everyone that's really holding me up, and my friends and family that's constantly praying for me, and my family. That's what's keeping my hope and my faith up and my spirits up while I'm here in Minnesota.
And what was it like when you were? Yeah, what was it like actually inside the courtroom for you?
It was emotional. It was intense because after going through this whole time of what was going on, the killing of my brother, to actually be in the courtroom and hear them talking about the whole case again, and actually seeing, Chauvin in the courtroom, it was kind of surreal and intense and emotional.
And the paramedics today were testifying, describing their futile attempts to revive your brother, who by all accounts was unresponsive by the time they had arrived. What was your reaction to that testimony, and also to the testimony of those bystanders who described feeling helpless, and some of them now haunted by what they witnessed?
Well, without getting too much into it, when I heard all the witnesses, I can't even split them up in categories like that. But with all the witnesses, I listen to them, and I see that not only do our family, the Floyd family, have to relive this, they also have to relive this too, because we're the family. So we feel it from the sister, aunt, cousin, father, the family side. They actually seeing it from a physical, close encounter side. So I just want to send my prayers out to them, too, because they're actually reliving it as we are as well.
And speaking of the family, your brother's battle with opioid addiction came up in testimony today, and your family's attorney released this statement saying, in part, we fully expected the defense to put George's character and struggles with addiction on trial because that is the go-to tactic when the facts are not on your side. We are confident that the jury will see past that to arrive at the truth that George Floyd would have lived to see another day if Derek Chauvin hadn't brutally ended his life in front of a crowd of witnesses pleading for his life. Why was it important to make this statement?
I mean, because, as everyone, it's important for that statement because as everyone saw on the video is what mattered. It's not, his addiction. It's not his past or whatever, because, before all of that, he was walking around just fine. You know, he was walking around breathing. So if they say he had drugs in the system, you know, it wasn't until that knee was on his neck which caused him to expire.
You obviously had that opportunity to be in court. You've sensed, I imagine, the jury and how they're responding to all of this. How confident are you that in the end justice will be served?
Well, with my belief and my faith, I'm confident justice will be served. You know, when I sit in the courtroom, you can feel that everyone feels that it was just inhumane what went on. So I'm confident. I'm definitely confident, and I'm actually putting my trust in the system, and I hope they don't fail me.
Terrence Floyd, we thank you again so much for your time, for talking with me tonight.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.